Pre-stats class, I'm going to show you how to use the spreadsheet to find this results of this hypothesis test from start to finish, setting it up all the way through it. So we got a study of 785 randomly selected medical malpractice lawsuits, and we found out how many of those 785 were dropped or dismissed. We want to use a 0.05 level significance to test the claim that most of them are dropped or dismissed. Okay, so we have to understand here, most implies a direction. 50-50 would be neither above or below. Neither fewer or most are dismissed. But because it specifically says most, that implies more than 50% is our alternate hypothesis. So if you look, that's option D down here. More than 50% equal to 50%. So remember, equality in the null, the alternate gets the direction if there's above or below most in this case. Alright, and then the next is just the test statistic. So we're doing the test at that point. So the test statistic is what we're getting in this formula. P hat, P, PQN. I've got them all labeled over here from the previous example. We're just going to do another example here with these values. Alright, P hat is the part of my sample that has characteristic that's being discussed. So that's the lawsuits that's dropped or dismissed. So I'm going to do, because it's not giving it to me as a percent in this one, it's given to me as a part of a whole. I'm going to do equals 520 is the X divided by 785 is the N. So there's my P hat to 3 decimal places. Right, P is the claim value. That's the 50% that we're seeing in the null and alternate hypothesis. If you get it correct, you know that that's the 0.5, that's the value of P. Alright, Q is 1 minus P. I just want you to see that's just 1 minus what's above it. And since that's 50, Q is also 50. Alright, then N is how many were in your sample. So that's the 785 in this one. And you can see my test statistic is 9. It's a huge number. Make sure you're rounding to the number of places that they tell you to. 9.10. That's my test statistic. Alright, now that's only in there because I did it on a previous problem. If you, again, we're working on this with a blank sheet, which you're going to on the final. What you got to remember is you're just typing in this formula right here. So it's equals, and then this is a parentheses around the numerator. P hat, click it, minus P, click it, close the parentheses, divide by SQRT is square root, open that parentheses, then click P times Q. Times Q, divide by, click the N, close the parentheses, and there's where that 9.10 is coming from. Alright, so once you've done it, you built it, you can use it for the homework problems, but you still need to know how to build that from your formula sheet. Alright, the next thing I want to know, what's the p-value? So the p-value, the area, this is a positive test statistic, so it's the area from that number on and further into the right tail. So that's going to be 1 minus normal DIST, and then all I'm doing from there, once I got the normal DIST, I'm clicking the test statistic. The mean is 0, standard deviation is 1 because it's standard normal. 1 for cumulative, and we get 0 for our probability. If I added more decimal places, you can see that eventually there's some non-zero values. It's just way on down the line. I mean, that is a huge, huge, huge test statistic. So for all intents and purposes, it is 0 here. Alright, to 3 decimal places, it definitely is 0. Alright, and then what is the conclusion? Well, the conclusion when our p-value is 0, it's going to be less than alpha. So that means we are going to reject. So it's going to be B or C because, again, A and D say fail to reject. Alright, why do we reject? We reject when the p-value is less than alpha. So that's B. Alright, if the p-value is greater than alpha, we do not reject. So that's why B is the answer. Alright, our final conclusion. Anytime we reject the null hypothesis, it's because there is sufficient evidence. So it's going to be either A or C that say there is sufficient. B and D both say there's not sufficient evidence. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that most medical malpractice lawsuits are dropped or dismissed. From there on, that most, all that, that's just the alternate hypothesis that we started off with. If you go back and look at what we set up, P is greater than 0.5. What is P? It's the proportion of malpractice lawsuits that are dismissed. And that's exactly what that's saying. So there is sufficient evidence to support the alternate hypothesis. All right, check our answer. That's right. and that's a start to finish hypothesis test.